Welcome back to the Evolving Warfighter. I'm Dr. Franklin Annis, and today I'm joined by a special guest, Sheridan Taylor. He's a Canadian combat veteran and author, having recently wrote a wonderful book called Not Okay, Okay, talking about his experiences surviving and processing the trauma that he experienced in the military. Today, we hope to sit down and talk a little about his experiences and how it relates to leadership, and ask for his recommendations in terms of what leaders need to know before they go into combat, and really take a look at what kind of things that he wish he had knowledge of before he went into kind of the extreme environments. Now, unfortunately, during the recording of this interview, I had a technical error. So unfortunately, I won't appear on the screen for the first 20 minutes of the interview, and I had to re-record the first few questions to Taylor, but please don't let it distract you from the wisdom that he has to offer. So without further ado, we'll jump right into the interview and talk to Sheridan. So thank you for joining me today.
I really appreciate this myself. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So I know I introduced you there, but would you like to elaborate and tell us more of your story?
Okay, well, I was born at a very young age, and then I pursued to get older. Yeah, I'm the product of intergenerational trauma from almost every stream we could think of. I'm Indigenous in Canada with all of the stuff that goes along with that, but I'm also fifth generation that we know of on one half of my family tree, and fourth generation on the other military. Like we just can't get enough cortisol. We just can't. Um, yeah, I'm an insane vet who's the son of an insane vet who is the son of a, and on and on. And my mother is the daughter of, and on and on. And it's just so on the one hand, I got it's like the story of my life. I got to see the very best and worst humanity has to offer, because that's what we do in the military, right? And so I got my basic training was was childhood, and it set me up for complete success and total failure in my military career. um, yeah, I enlisted late. I was 24. Um, uh, I didn't have the self-confidence and self-esteem, the self-worth to believe that I could do what I'd always knew I was going to do. I was told, my one of my aunts told me when I was 4, I had already said, I'm going to be a soldier and then a cop, and I'd probably knife hand her. I probably did it. My 7-year-old does to me now. My 7-year-old knife hands me. My 4-year-old doesn't yet. You ever argue with a 7-year-old about who can give who the knife hand?
Can't say that I have.
That's my family. And then, yeah, so I was 24 when I found the stones to go enlist. I enlisted. I joined the infantry. Um, I did 16 years and change before I was medicaled out. Uh, I was with the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment in Ontario for 8 years, and then I was with the 3rd Battalion of PPCLI, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, in Edmonton for 9. I did 2 tours apiece in Bosnia and in Afghanistan. I rose to the giddy heights of Master Corporal, which is I'm not even sure what that rank is in the American military. It's the very first step towards of an NCO. It's so your lowest rank of sergeant, whatever that is. And then my career stalled at that point. On the one hand, it was supposed to take off like a rocket because I had achieved some pretty cool stuff, mostly by accident, because that's how I do things. And then, but at the same time, I'd injured my back a little bit too much, and I got clipped by a taxi cab in Kabul, gently. Like it wasn't like I didn't get sent flying or anything. He came screaming out of nowhere, because that's how they drive in Afghanistan. I was dragged, and it just tapped. My helmet was we weren't supposed to be wearing helmets at that point yet. So my helmet was fixed to my butt pack, and it just bumped my helmet, which drove it into the like the L4, L5 area, which I already had herniated discs from jumping out of airplanes and carrying rucksacks and rodeo and martial arts and just being an overcompensating dummy. And that was it. That was the last little tweak. And from then, my spine began to degenerate and my career stalled. I couldn't progress because I couldn't do the courses. And I refused because I'm super grunt. I refused to pursue any other course of action other than I will force my body to meet my will. My body will do as I damn well tell it to. I will become Johnny Rambo again.
That works on the short term, but not on the long one.
Yeah, so I would heal, recover fast to a point, and then I would just go too far, and like it was 2 steps forward, one back, 2 forward, one back, 2 forward, 3 back, 2 forward, 5 back, and then I finally had to give in to the inevitable and accept a medical release. So my career, on the one hand, I didn't ascend the rank structure. On the other hand, by staying as long as I did, a very long time, at the lowest possible level of leadership, I got to really get a grip on what leadership should look like. I wasn't doing it, but I knew what it should be. Right? So, as everything, right? Everything's perspective. And yeah, I was stalled out, but I got to do the job for a long time.
It is an interesting situation in the military that the lowest level leaders often have the most influence and really some degree the most important jobs. So at least on the officer side of the house for me, when I think about kind of sheer combat power, really the tip of the spear is at the company level. So company commanders, platoon leaders out there leading, but they're some of the most junior, inexperienced officers. So it's almost would make more sense for them to go into a staff officer position, gain some competency before they would go into that immediate role. And it's the same kind of situation for corporals or sergeants. Here they are having an incredibly important role to play in terms of leadership and keeping their soldiers healthy and moving forward in combat. And they really need experience, but there's really no good way of providing them leadership experience before they get thrown into the crucible of combat.
Right? Yeah, it's the same thing. It's how do you, because at that lowest level is when I have the most people working under me, right? So that's when I have the most influence and the most impact. But I'm at my most, I lack I'm at my most inexperienced, right, in terms of knowledge and skills, but I'm also at my most inexperienced in terms of emotional development, right? Like we're putting kids in charge of kids. Right? Their brains aren't even fully developed until they're like 25, 26. But there's leaders leading, and they're 22, 23. And they're doing amazing. But should we put that kind of, is it fair to them?
I don't think war is fair on anyone.
Fair. Valid point, sir. But yeah, it's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And like I got to see and work for some of the greatest leaders I've ever known or even heard of. In fact, our current chief of defense staff, the guy in charge of our whole military, was the colonel of 3PP CLI when I was in there. So I got to see like great leaders, but I also got to see what happens when you don't have experienced and mature leadership. Right there, I knew some guys that were incredibly knowledgeable, but they were emotionally adolescent.
So in the U.S. Army, there's between the rank of specialist and sergeant or buck sergeant E5, there would be like a basic NCO course. So I'm assuming that you had something similar to that. Can you speak to if you thought the training was good and it had the right focus?
It's good training. It was excellent. It's better than anything I've seen in the civilian world by far, right? And we'll talk about leadership and management in the civilian world later. But no, the leadership provided, the training provided was absolutely excellent. It was run by leaders, and I was very fortunate too in that the cadre on my particular leadership course were some of the finest NCOs we had in battalion. And I'd already gotten to have. I was I was blessed. I was so blessed when I joined our military. Ironically, I got injured in basic. I tore a bunch of muscles and ligaments in my lower legs. Been plagued by shin splints my whole life ever since. But that put me back a cycle or two on our training. So instead of going to Gagetown, which is in New Brunswick, and which is a mechanized unit, luck of the draw, I got onto a course that I passed, and I went to 3 RCR, which was light infantry and paratroopers. All the NCOs and all the leaders were men from the Canadian Airborne Regiment, the finest soldiers Canada's ever had, which says by default, some of the best soldiers the world's ever seen. I'm just saying, I might be biased, but I got to work under and learn under the best soldiers as far as in the world. Quite honestly, they were amazing men, and I got to see what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to do the job, and what real leadership looks like. So I was already ahead of the curve when I went to my leadership course, and I was a little more mature too because, like I said, I didn't enlist till I was 24. So I was 25, 26 when I went on my leadership course. So the brain was beginning to actually fuse a bit, and I was becoming a little more emotionally stable than I had been previous. And so yeah, I got to experience leadership, and then I'll say this about getting tossed into leadership, and I'm sure you'll agree. You grew up real fast because you have to, right? When you have to, not just like, it's not like I don't just need to make my boss happy, right? The sergeant says this, the captain says this, the brigadier general says this, and yeah, I got to do what I'm told to do. But I got men who need me to make the right call, right? I've got these 6 dudes, right? It's only 6 guys, right? But these 6 men are looking to me to make the right call and to look like I know what I'm doing. So they gotta. I might be screwing up, but if I look like I know what I'm doing, and their confidence is high enough, we're gonna pull it off, right? It's like in our orders format. The first thing is the commander's intent at the highest possible level, right? The biggest guy in charge wants this to happen, and that's the first thing you hear. So if you forget everything else in orders, at least you know what you're supposed to do, and you can go make it up as you go along. Right. So as long as my guys believe in me, no matter how stupid I am, as long as everybody's on track, we all know what we're supposed to do, and the guys believe I can make it work, they'll make it work. And that's the secret to leadership, isn't it? Right?
So looking back in hindsight, what do you wish that would have been included in your NCO development that would have prepared you better for combat?
I look back at everything now because for your viewers who don't have the full scope of what happened with me, I went completely off the rails. I went. I was completely lost in trauma and in the symptoms of it, and depression, anxiety, and I was going to kill myself to save my child from becoming me, because that's what my leadership mentality said I had to do, right? Sacrifice and right. So I look at everything now in a very different lens, right? I don't think tactically or strategically anymore. I think emotionally and then strategically and tactically. So I don't. You and I met because of the BOSS program before operational stress. I recently introduced our Chief of Defense Staff to Dr. Mackler. Sorry, Megan. Mackler. Sorry, Megan. And my intention, not just for our military, but for every first responder agency in Canada and hopefully the U.S., if we can push this, right, is that BOSS becomes part of recruit training.
For the sake of the audience, let's explain the before operational stress or BOSS program a little bit more. So it was designed by Dr. Megan, based off of ancient Stoic philosophy, and the intent is to give individuals an understanding of what's going to happen to them physiologically and give them effective thinking patterns to handle high stress environments. So the first program was originally designed for emergency responders. So you have your police, your firefighters, your emergency medical technicians in that group. And then luckily, you and myself had a chance to help shape the program in the second iteration and gear it towards the military.
Yeah. You nailed it perfectly. Yeah. So my goal was to try to get this before operational stress. So if we can get that incorporated in recruit training, and it's easy in recruit because it's, it's a few hours of viewing, and then we can have like structured talks as part of it. And if we don't, they're confined to barracks. You're not going anywhere. Paula, spit on your boots and watch this in that order. And then we're going to talk, right? And then we're going to do push-ups. And then we're going to talk some more, you know?
So in 2006, the U.S. Army was at the height of the surge into the Iraq and Afghan war. We had a tremendous number of suicides, so the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time directed that the Army find a resiliency program, and the Army basically went and bought off-a-shelf program that was actually originally designed for preteens and started using it. And it's something that one day I hope to see the U.S. Army buy an improved program like the BOSS program that's more suitable for soldiers. But did the Canadian military have any type of resiliency program that was built in the training for you?
Well, we tried. We had something called the Road to Mental Readiness, and it was good as far as it went. But it's the thing about what Megan is doing is it's the delivery that gets people right. The knowledge maintained is the same because psychology hasn't changed as far as humans have existed. Right, but the delivery system, the way it's wrapped up, packaged, and handed to the viewers or recipients is different. It's better. It's more geared towards how we think, right? Because when I did R2MR, I had an NCO with his beret on doing this. Well, I'm not learning psychology and I'm not emotionally safe right now. I'm not feeling validated. Okay, Sarge? All right? You doing this is not making me feel comfortable and safe, right? In fact, I want to get up and scrap because that's what my body does. I'm challenged. We're going to fight, right? I'm going to lose because my sergeant was terrifying, but still, right? So this is different and it's delivered better. So I would like to see that. So that's if I could go back and change things, change my leadership course, I would have it. I wouldn't change what's taught, but I would maybe change and include not just like how to get troops motivated, not just the idea that you look after your troops, right? My mission, my men, myself, right? But the idea of understanding how our bodies do what they do, so why we have to do things the way we do them, and how to better prepare and support my troops so that I'm not going to come back and find my kid with his bungee cord around his neck in his closet. Right? He's not, right? It's not. How do like, that's the sort of thing that, because we do this, we do this really stupid thing, not just the military, but humans in general, and especially we're really bad at it in the with the European Judeo-Christian sort of culture we have, right, where we want to compartmentalize and separate everything. So we do that with like psychological training, and this training, and this training, and this training. Right? If we take that idea of, okay, so I had driver training, right? I learned how to operate motor vehicles, right, to a certain degree. And I had firearms training. I learned how to operate various firearms. You know what I never learned? How to shoot while driving. I never learned how to shoot at somebody running really fast across that patch of ground while I'm doing 90 this way. I never learned that. Probably should have, because we did that sort of thing. Right? But everything's little bits and pieces, and then we just try to throw it all together at the end. Same thing with psychology, right? If we'd incorporated these concepts, these basic concepts of psychology, of how the human body works, if I had just known at any point in my life prior to 47 that an emotion is a physiological response inside my body to external stimuli, no different than pain or fatigue, I can't even imagine how different my life would have been. And therefore, everyone I impacted and interacted with at every stage of my life, right? If I had known that I'm actually, as a human being, not supposed to shut off my emotions forever, I'd have been a better person. Therefore, I would have been a better leader.
Well, and so the frame, what you just said in technical language, right? So just because of kind of industrial society, we've gotten into being specialists or monomaths. So we focus on one single task, and very few people hold the ability to kind of work across the range. So to take things from the start to finish, everyone, because it's more cost effective a lot of times in the industrial area, we turn people into individual widgets. So no one really learns the next job of the next widget. You just focus on being kind of the production of the one widget, which it's kind of interesting in the leadership aspect, especially in the military, because you have to have the broad scope of the kind of human experience. And the question is, how do we train people to be kind of warriors while being human, instead of separating into subtasks and using this kind of industrial model versus kind of a much...
Yeah. Like because we used to do it. We did it, if you read the writings of Xenophon, if you read the writings of any of the great warriors of the Bronze Age that like the words have come back, we've managed to retain them. They all talk about warfare from an emotional perspective. Like, they talk about the fear and they talk about overcoming it. They don't talk about not feeling it. Like, they glorify or emphasize perhaps that this Achilles was a mighty warrior because he did what he had to do, no matter how scared he was. Right? With this idea that we have emotions, they're what happened to us. We have to do what we have to do, not despite them, but with them and through them.
So it's really interesting. Like, I never would have thought, like, so if I take all my experience in training, so whatever, we go out, really terrify experience in officer basic course where we do a live fire drill of a squad attack. If you ever want to be terrified, put a whole bunch of live ammunition with a whole bunch of lieutenants and tell them to try to cross each other's path while firing live rounds. But, like, I could never think of, like, stopping that training and saying, hey, how did you feel emotionally? Which is a really kind of interesting thought process that, like, we're not really even discussing that.
Right? And if somebody did, like, for my entire career, right? And like I said, I consider myself blessed to have worked under the men I worked with. right? I had great leaders. They were my heroes, and they called me one of them. Okay, like there's an exercise I did in a group therapy session, 5 veterans, 4 veterans, where you have to recount your proudest moment in front of other people. That's hard because especially we preach the quiet professionalism, right? That's the cult of the quiet professionalism. So to stand up in front of my peers and say, I did this, it's really hard. So it's not swearing, by the way.
It's okay.
But um, my proudest moment was on an exercise. We were playing enemy force for a reserve, like your National Guard basic course, and we were just screwing them up, just playing bad guys. And when I was introduced, we were introduced by this airborne regiment veteran, and he went Private Smith, Private Bloggins, Private Jones, Trooper Taylor, blah 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 blah, private. Trooper short for paratrooper.
Yeah.
It's an unofficial rank, which makes it more special, right? This guy right then and there said that I made the grade, right? So I consider myself blessed in my career by having worked for these guys. But all of us, my father did it first. Every male in our culture, in my generation and preceding and so many after, this idea that we're not allowed to feel certain things, right? Not allowed to feel fear. That's weakness. Can't feel sad. It's weakness. Homesick. Weakness. Lonely. Weakness. Anything other than as a manly man. Look at my tattoos, right? As a manly man, I'm allowed to experience or feel angry, hungry, tired, and horny. That's it. Anything less than that, and I'm not manly. That's what I learned. The problem is I can't not feel anything and everything else. So I learned this lesson that I'm not as good as I should be. I'm inherently flawed and there's something wrong with me. So when I have, as a child, I did this to my oldest son. We're repairing the damage, but I remember clearly the day I see his face. It haunts me. The day he was scared and I'm not even sure what it was. I was so insane. I was so bananas. I was lost in some flashback of some kind. He began to cry, and I turned around, I knife handed him, and I screamed at him in rage, which is always productive for children or anyone. And I realized I just done what had been done to me. And I thought about this, this cascade of thoughts began to I had to find things to whip myself with, right? To castigate myself, to prove that I'm worthless. That's what I did, right? I started on that trail, and then I gotta constantly reinforce my feelings of worthlessness by finding more examples of how worthless I was. So that's what I did then. And I thought about times when, and not just in the military, but I was a corrections officer for 12 years as well, when anybody, subordinate or superior, would express fear or anything of any kind, my response was never positive, right? I always got, suck it up, welcome to the job, right? This is war. You want to be that sort of thing. So what I did as I was taught. You're not allowed to be scared. You can't be scared. You still get scared. You just get better at hiding it. But the problem with that is, like, if I turn to you and I go, "Hey, Franklin, that was really scary, and I'm really frightened, and I don't know what to do with this," and you turn to me and you give me the John Wayne, Clint Eastwood growl, I receive a negative social response, reinforcing the idea that I'm not allowed to have that response in my body, reinforcing the concept that I'm therefore flawed, broken, weak, less than, and the event may not have been traumatic, right? Up to this point, right? It may not have resulted in trauma, but the negative social response I received from somebody I respect, there's my PTSD. right? So how do we fix that? We could give social positive
So
response, right? But
and you brought it up before, right? So if you look back at like Xenophon, so something really interesting happened somewhere around the 19th century, and it's we divided kind of masculinity and emotion, and you had kind of a cultural separation where we say like only certain types of men can feel emotion. So if you're an artist, you're a poet, you can feel emotion, but if you're not, then that would be inappropriate. So I love the BOSS program because it really connects back to the physiologically, the emotion of things. But once again, you said Xenophon. You go back and read Xenophon, and there's a ton of emotions in the ancient Greeks. Like you read whatever the Iliad, right? So you have whole entire armies crying because a father's crying over the death of his son, and tons of emotion. So I guess outside of like the ancient Greeks, what's the materials that we bring in back in, or do you have any suggestions in terms of like how do we reintroduce the, I don't know, well, really the openness about the emotion or kind of background psychology?
well, it's kind of happening. There's kind of a movement happening, and the pendulum may have swung too bloody far, right? But there is this move, and the pendulum always does do this, right? Eventually, it comes back here somewhere. Hopefully, within our lifetime. But yeah, we teach. First of all, we teach psychology. These are things in your body. Your body's supposed to do it. You're supposed to jerk your hand away from a hot stove. You're supposed to cry when you're sad. Why? Because crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system, pulling you out of fight or flight. It's good for you. Bawl. It's cool. We just learn to be comfortable in our own bodies, so we let others feel comfortable in theirs. And hey, you know what? We just kind of all get along. But it has to be. We have to reverse this screwed up mentality. I blame the Victorians for everything. I just don't like them. But
Okay.
I just don't like them. But
no, it does.
That makes sense.
It does. I'm trying to figure out if it's exactly the Victorians. It's somewhere in there.
It's not that far. Like I'm not that far off. I just blame them because they just took it to they perfected the idea of absurdity. But like that's where kind of like I say it starts. I don't have to, or it makes sense, but that's where I say it started. I blame them. But that's where we took this idea of stoicism and we warped it and distorted it and bastardized it, right, and packaged it in such that the Stoics didn't experience emotion. Really? Pretty sure they were humans. Homo sapiens have been the same for a long time. We've all kind of worked like this forever, so you're wrong. But then we also add in the warped teachings, and I hope not to offend anyone because it's not meant that way. But I'm going to say some bad sounding things about Christianity, and it's not intended as a slight towards anybody's faith. But we did the same thing with the teachings of the Christian Church, where we take this idea of judgment to an extreme, where, and it's not deliberate, but it's kind of like we're waiting around for Judgment Day, for heaven's sakes. No pun intended, right? But there's this idea that if you don't follow these rules, right? There's more than 10, but we'll just talk about the big 10, right? If you don't follow these rules, you're bad, and Daddy won't love you anymore. That's not okay. As a daddy, right? And I am a daddy. I can tell you that no matter what my children do, and they never listen to me anyway. They never listen to me. I've never stopped loving them. I've gotten really mad. I've gotten really upset, right? And most times it's stupid because I'm just being insecure. But I've never stopped. I can't think of anything they could do where I would stop loving them. I might get really angry at them, right? But so I refuse to believe that, the divine power, but we have this idea of it. So why? Because that enforces social control.
So hopefully I'm going to take your thought and build on it. So tell me if I'm wrong. So if we actually look back at whether it's the Stoics or a Neo-Stoics, which is when Stoicism combined with the Christian theology kind of around the 16th century, very deeply tied with the military. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the story of Aeneas in the Iliad or Virgil's. Whether it's a story of Virgil or where you have Daniel Defoe wrote Robinson Crusoe, in those, yes, you have hey, you should live a virtuous life. Like, this is how you orient yourself. But if you fail, there is a recovery process. So if you commit murder and violate one of the commandments, you can be forgiven as long as you return to living virtuously. And I think that a lot of religions, that we've gotten really simplistic on the framing of judgment, where the purpose was to redirect people to virtue, where now we think you make a mistake and we're going to say you're not X in this group, whether it's you're not a Stoic because you didn't behave stoically, or you're not a Christian because you went out and sinned, or you have the other extreme where you say, oh, no one should be judged for anything at all. And then again, like, either side of the extreme, you don't have the orientation to say, hey, you made a mistake, but you really need to, like, come together, live with virtue, be a productive, healthy member of society, and don't live in the two extremes. Like, don't exclude people or don't accept people that aren't behaving well.
Yeah. And then we have the complete, and I don't care if it offends anybody, the complete evil of Marxism.
Yeah.
Because it is evil. Why? And not because if you look at it through the same lens, right? What's Marxism? It is the purest form of judgment. It's literally calling for the genocide of an entire class of people because they're successful.
Yeah.
It's awful, and nothing good's ever come of it. And yet it won't go away. Now you have postmodernism, and it's being taught in universities. I spent 2 years in universities fighting with professors because it was fun. They were all.
Well, yeah. So Marxism, instead of orientating towards virtue, right, where you'd have neo-Stoicism, Stoicism, Marxism is literally an orientation towards vice. So the more you're offended, the more you're jealous, the more, I don't know, more isolating you are to people. Like, you're not oriented to doing good and being better. You're oriented into tearing down or breaking things.
Yeah,
and even Marx himself, when he was alive, he supported terrorist action, and he could never lay out how he got to his utopia, and he never really made any attempt to say, if you overthrew everything and you tore everything down, how would you rebuild your perfect society? Because that was always too difficult for him. So he just kind of said, hey, we'll just support killing to break the current system, but we won't give you any answer to how to build the utopia.
And then he also called for the dissolution of the nuclear family.
Yes.
Which okay. I'm First Nations, okay? So what you would call Native American, okay? What we called in my childhood an Indian, which is weird because we've never been to India. We were never in India, ever, right? Might have skirted it as we walked across Beringia at some point, but anyway, I'm not an Indian. But we tried taking children away from their parents and forcing them to assimilate to a different society. We called it residential schools. And nothing good happened for 150 years. So he was wrong, just everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I blame... Well, and that's the one book that I saw on your reading list that I was going to ask you about, was Plato's Republic. That was like the worst totalitarian government I could imagine. So yes. Plato's Republic believed that all children should be raised in common, and the thought process is, if you don't know what child is yours, you're going to treat every child like your own child. But in practice, every communist nation that ever tested it proved that if you don't know what child is yours, then no child is yours, and you don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's always someone else's child.
Yeah. So, yeah. Now, the Republic is... I kind of wish I hadn't put that in the book, but in the email to my kids, it makes sense because we're going to talk about it as they're reading, right? But yeah, so I kind of wish I hadn't put Plato's work in there, but it's in there, You know what?
It's good. I would have just added one more sentence, which we can add in this podcast, right? Like, hey, you have to critically read the Republic,
Yeah,
not just to accept it.
yeah. It's not, that. Yeah, that's the. Yeah, I like that. I should have. If I ever redo the book, we'll change that a little bit. Because for those of you who aren't unfamiliar with the book, which is almost everybody in the world, when I wrote that, I was coming out the far end of madness, and I was writing three different sort of things, different streams. One, I was putting out social media posts just to try and reduce stigma because um, I have a certain amount of street cred amongst peace officers in Alberta and veterans in Canada. So by just coming up and being honest and open about my struggles, it gives others freedom to do the same. Or to, if not do it openly, at least to accept in their own minds that it's okay for them to struggle, which is, that was one goal. I needed to try and save the kids. I still do. That's why I'm doing this. No more. No more dead babies. No more. So that was one stream. I was, like I said, corresponding with individuals, giving them information that because they weren't going to therapy, right? Stigma, right? So I was giving them information that I was getting from my shrink, whether it be individual therapy or in group therapy with Wounded Warriors or Veterans Transition Network. So there was these letters being written. And then I was also writing emails to my children who were then they were then one one and four, I think, 1 and 3, 1 and 4. So for them to read when they get old enough to understand and read. And then I realized that like these three streams go together. And my wife reads everything, and she told me to write a book. And for the first time, people tell me to write a book for years, and I just always told them to go pound salt. But I did put all these streams together, and then my publisher said, "Yeah, well, you need to do this part here, put in like the actual instructions, which is like book 2, part 2, right?" Um, so that's what the book is just me putting everything out there that I learned as I learned it, and that's what that little section was that we're talking about. The reading list was a list of books I want my kids to read when they're old enough to grasp the material. And yeah, it's pretty pretty eclectic selection. Or
Well, it's wonderfully. You covered most of the Western canon and a lot of the Eastern canon. You did an exceptional job on your reading list. So I guess I should ask, so how much of this reading list did you discover after kind of the more traumatic events in your life?
none.
Like,
None. I'd read all of
okay.
that in my adolescence.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd read all those books in my adolescence, which is why I want my boys to read it, but with the guidance of a mostly stable father, which I didn't have. My father is not. My father's not a bad man. He's never intended to be a bad man, which means he's not a bad man, right? Intention counts. But he did a lot of really bad shit because he was just uninformed. He did as he knew from his father, right? He did better than his father. His father used to punch him in the face till his arms got tired. He's a he was a heavyweight boxer, right? My dad never punched me ever once. So way to go, Dad, right? But yeah, he was deeply traumatized and a veteran, and that doesn't make things better. So he didn't. As I got older, he got less stable. So did my mother, which then fed each other, right? So I take great comfort in knowing that as my sons are getting older, their father is getting better, becoming more alert, more aware, more informed, more able to regulate and therefore use the knowledge he actually has, right? And that's I learned. Let's take this back to leadership. That's what parenting is, and that's what leadership is. They're the same bloody thing. Modeling the behavior you wish your subordinates to exhibit. You know what your troops are doing? Yeah, well, you suck. fix your shit, right? If your troops aren't doing what you want them to be doing, the way you want them to be doing it, look in the mirror, because they're doing what they're shown, right? So I knew that, and I knew that as a as a junior NCO, but I didn't know that. I didn't translate that to being a dad, right? I had this moment of like this epiphany, like, oh, well, you're dumb, right? But so leadership is two things, right? And it's the same thing. And leadership and dadding, right, are the same thing. Leading and dadding are the same thing in these two areas. Number one, right, is your kids and your troops will do what you show them. They will do what you do, not what you say, right? So model behavior you want them to exhibit. Rule 2 of like leading and dadding is you work for your people. They don't work for you, right? My kids don't work for me. I work to make their life as good as I can. I work for them. When I was an NCO, if I'd been a little better at that, I don't think I was bad at it, but I look back and it's like I could have done this, right? But I work for my troops. My job is to let them do their job and deflect the shit. That's my job. That was and I was, especially my first tour, I was so again blessed in that I was handed. We had this shuffle, and I was handed the best troops in the world. They'd already been trained by a good friend of mine. I trained with them a little bit here and there. They were already all experienced troops, good dudes, solid cats, every one of them with at least one tour somewhere under their belt. So I just inherited this. So what was my job as their leader? Tell them when, like, just transmit information and deflect shit, and just stay out of their way. just stay out of their way. And they made amazing things happen. So that's how that works, right? If you show them how you want them to be, they will do that. If you show them what you think the ideal soldier is, no matter how little you may actually meet that criteria, if they think you're there, if they believe that you're there, they'll work really hard to get there, and then they'll surpass you. And that's the goal. As an NCO and as a dad, my entire goal is to make my people better than me, and it's not hard. My 7-year-old's better than me, and all of my troops were better than me, right? But they didn't know that. They didn't know that. Some of them still don't know that.
We don't say it a lot, but you have to love your soldiers in a way. It like a father loves a child, and that's a hard lesson to learn, especially if you're a young kid and you've never done it before. You don't have the maturity, and I think a lot of kind of even the books that you put on your reading list, like it's really great to be introduced into the knowledge, but if you don't have the experience, a lot of times you can't pull out the actual meaning of a lot of these things.
Yeah, and and how do you? Yeah, you have to love your troops, and then how do you love your troops and then tell them to go do something it's gonna kill them? That's hard.
Yeah.
Like, how do you? Right, and then on top of that, when we don't know how to help them deal with the repercussions. So then we haven't planted, but we've watched a seed get planted, and we didn't really see it. We didn't know what we were seeing, and then that seed becomes a very poisonous plant, and it kills them. Years later, decades later, it grows, and it kills them. It tried to kill me. Right? It tried its best to kill me. And it has killed. Just a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine. Like, if we don't know what we're looking at, we can't save each other, right? If I don't let you know, hey man, I genuinely do care about you. I'm invested in your well-being. I want you to succeed in life. I want you to reach happiness and contentment. I want you to always aspire, seek to achieve. But you're not going to do that if you don't learn to be okay with what's going on in here. You know, how do you get a bunch of 19, 20-year-old uber aggressive alpha males to sit around and go, "I love you, brother." Like,
Yeah, well, and yeah, it's not the artificial type stuff either.
right?
It's not the whatever kumbaya. It's an actual honest
Yeah,
feeling, and it's going to be so different
right. How do
to
you,
different communities. It's very, very difficult to quantify
the
or
culture
build
we've
or
created?
support. Yeah.
Like, I cannot picture, a squad of Rangers sitting around saying, "I love you." I just don't see that. Like, and I'm not sure we should, but I do believe firmly that we need to, as leaders, if we're going to be leaders, do this too. How do we get this to happen? The same way we got everything else to happen. We model it, right? If a hard charging, snake eating door kicker comes forward and models the behavior, the rest of us are going to do it. Why do we say hua? Right? Because Rangers did. And they're cool. Right? They're cool. I want to be like them. Right? Why do we do all the things we do? Because some snake eater did it first. What happened? So when our leaders model the behavior, if when they come forward and they should say it, first of all, if they have the courage, if any of them have the courage to step forward and get help to deal with their shit, and then step forward again in front of everyone and say, "Hey, I was really struggling because of these things, right? And this is what I did about it. And if you're feeling these things, please do it too." Things change, right? What's his name? Pat McNamara. Um, Sauce dude. Delta for a long time. I think he was a command sergeant major. He recently came forward and said he'd been struggling with some stuff. He's been very upfront and very honest. That kind of courage. If we have more, Matt Best, Black Rifle Coffee Company, right? Awesome, cool cat, right? Super cool dude. We all want to be like Matt. I want to be like Matt, right? He came forward out and said he struggled with some stuff, right? If more people come forward, like if Jocko Willink, David Goggins, like if our superheroes, right, are bigger or larger than life, snake eating, door kicking, bad dudes, come forward and say, "This is what I went through. This is how I got better." If they model that behavior, our kids will too. That's how we do it, right? The chiefs of staff, like everybody, right, come forward and not. I'm not saying like don't be hard asses, right? I'm not saying we got to be soft and hug our troops. Sometimes we got to hug our troops, right? Sometimes we got to put our boot all the way up their ass, right? Like sometimes they got to taste kiwi polish all the way up. Like, I did. Right? If I could slack off, I'm going to slack off, right? Doesn't matter how hard you are. At a certain point, I've maxed out. Like you're still 60 grit, cool. I'm now 10 ply. I'm done. Like, so yeah, boot up my ass. Oh wait, no, what? No, I am tough enough. I can, right? But yeah, we gotta show them the full range of masculinity. Masculinity isn't just John Wayne from a 1940s war movie, right? Like I love John Wayne movies. I've seen the Cowboys 800 times probably. I'm not even exaggerating, right? But I look at it now and I go, wow, everything's wrong.
Ah, man. See,
Right?
I'd argue with there. See, this is also the problem, right? I think that a lot of the times, if we don't share the actual philosophy, we can actually perceive men and think that they're fearless, where they're going through kind of all this stoic philosophy in their mind. So they seem calm and collective, and they understand kind of what they're going through. So if we sent someone through the BOSS program, right, they would have kind of that better behavior traits in the face of stress. But if you didn't understand what they were thinking of, and you only could see them as kind of this untouchable person, then you just try to copy that mirror image without understanding any of the philosophy. So
right.
a lot of the John Wayne movies, I think, well, even if you watch like Green Beret, you see a lot of emotion in there, but what's not in there is like the philosophy behind like what's going on. And if you understand the philosophy, someone sits down and tells you how to do it, then it all makes sense. But if you don't understand the philosophy, then you just get the cardboard cutout. You try to be the cardboard cutout.
Yeah, it's just teaching all the wrong stuff, right? And it's not because anybody had the intention, right? They're telling a great story. And when you understand the subtext and the context, the story's even better.
Yes.
But 99.9% of people sitting in those movie theaters watching the Duke toss some kid in a river, right? Great scene, right? But
Gotta love Hondo.
right? But yeah, like that's the full message wasn't being delivered, right? And the same thing like Clint Eastwood, man, like I want to be Clint, but
You probably get more with Clint Eastwood than you do John Wayne, because I think that's even further removal from the emotion in those films. So like the 1980s, 1990s were not good for kind of action movies for masculinity being fully examined or explained.
Right? Like John J. Rambo, man, I that was my role model in life. And now, but if you watch First Blood, the ending, right? He's crying, and somehow, and I'm just realizing this right now. I'm just cluing in right now. Somehow, I took that scene and went,
yeah. So yeah, selective. We see what we want to see.
Yep. I'm just looking like, yeah, because he went from burning down Hope, BC, to killing half of Vietnam. He just skipped over the end of the first movie and went right to the middle. In my mind, right to the middle of the second movie. Yeah. So but I missed the subtext and context as a kid. So yeah, we got to add that in. Teach our troops, male and female alike, of course, what the full scope of being human means, right? And how if I could change my leadership training at all, it would be to get that underpinning first, right? Again, commander's intent. I would think the understanding of our emotions and how they work then lets me become a better leader. I understand why, not just how to motivate my troops, but how to help them motivate themselves. But more than that, how to help them like heal themselves. How to.
Yeah.
I don't know how to word this. I'm struggling.
Well, and this is where like the knowledge of emotional intelligence or just human psychology is so powerful for military leaders. Number one, because we need it to protect ourselves and our soldiers. But number two, it's a powerful weapon to know exactly how to break or terrify people. And if you can do it correctly, you can safeguard your own soldiers while wreaking havoc on the enemy. And there's like obviously certain things that we go out and do and certain tactics that we use that's specifically geared towards like certain weaknesses in human psychology. So it's not, there's a full gambit. And I think a lot of the problem with the emotional intelligence research is everybody wants to focus on like the positive aspects. So no one wants to talk about how you manipulate people or how you use it for propaganda purposes. But really, as a military leader, you have to understand kind of that full scope and kind of the positive, the negatives, and how to use it to protect or hamper the enemy.
Right? Like there's a reason why the bad guys got so powerful, right? Hitler, right? Their propaganda was I don't think it's been surpassed until now, right? Mao, master propaganda, right?
Oh yeah.
And psyops gets a bad rap, right? But what was Sun Tzu teaching? Right?
Yeah.
What was he preaching from the start? Right? Know your man, like know yourself, know your man, know your enemy. You always win, right? Psyops. How do you like to go to war? Isn't the epitome like to win a victory? Isn't the epitome, right? The epitome of is to not have to go to war at all. to get your enemy to do what you want them to do without anybody drawing a sword.
Yeah.
PsyOps, right? So yeah, just you're right. If we understand human psychology, like the communists were masters of it, of the dark side of human psychology, of using it. Their system is inherently flawed and can't succeed. It just cannot. But they managed to hang on for a century with propaganda, with psychology, with dark arts of psyops, right?
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, like, what would I change? Very, very little. I would even, like, the injuries, the pain, my own trauma, I wouldn't change any of it. I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for my pain because it's made me come through on the other side and see things better, and I'm able, like, again, I'm leading, right? I went to hell and I stayed there on my own accord, and I lived there until I got tired of it and left. And now I'm showing you what to do and how you can do it. I wouldn't change any of that. But if I could change how the leadership, and maybe it's changed now, I don't know. I doubt it, kind of. But yeah, if we could incorporate that, the knowledge of human psychology and what emotions are, how they work, I would incorporate that into leadership training at every scope.
So I'll throw in the term, because you just said it, post-traumatic growth. So the idea that we can go through traumatic experiences, we can literally hit breaking points. But that experience, if we can turn it positively, can bring us back not only to where we were before, but actually make us far better people, humans, better leaders, more capable of handling the next barrier. So the goal isn't that we should be scared that our soldiers are going to experience trauma. It's the fact that we should always be teaching our soldiers that they can use that trauma as fuel to get better, even if it sucks going through it. Like, there's a sun on the other side of the cloud. You just gotta go through it.
Like, this. I've been likening in my mind the idea of trauma and recovery to the hero quest. This is what it is, right? The naive young, hero of our story wanders into hell, struggles, faces the monster, overcomes the monster, becomes better, right? Arthur, Beowulf, Sigarther, I can't even go into all the Asian, but it's the same story. Right? Joseph Campbell made a living out of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
right? It's the same story.
Well, yeah. So more importantly, the hero story. The hero encounters the enemy and loses their first battle. Then they have to go find the wise men that can teach them how to, it's both. It's really that tactical, how to fight, and the mental, how to deal with the stress or deal with the fear. And then only after you go through that first trial can you go back and defeat the enemy. But you have to go through the failure, because if there's no initial failure, there's no success.
Yeah, you have to learn, recover, and get stronger through adversity. That's what every hero story is. It's overcoming adversity to become better. And that's what post-traumatic growth is. And that's if we can teach that to young soldiers, right? You have to struggle. Because we've created this society now where we don't want our kids to struggle, right? And so what happens? They break, right? We have 2 generations now of children who are broken, and nothing's happened to them. But we did this. We did this to our kids, right? We need to teach our soldiers that, like, not just seek and accept responsibility, seek and accept adversity. Embrace the suck is not just a cute little phrase, man. It's a lifestyle. Dig into it. Embrace the suck. You know what sucks the most? Feeling your shit. That sucks the most in the whole wide world. So just embrace that and do it. Sit in it. Okay. And then here's the hard part. When it wants to go away, let it go away. And then, you know what? You've just gone through an entire emotion. You've processed the whole thing. Let that happen every time. It gets easier and faster. Now, go shoot the bad guy in the face. Like, That's what we teach them. Okay, sit in your emotion. It's gonna be awful. Do it. Okay. Now, front sight, squeeze. Don't jerk. Okay, good. All right. Yeah. Next.
Yeah, so it's yeah, so that's the difficult point, which I guess we could pull out a little bit more is so if you're in the middle of a firefight, it's okay to suppress things until you win the firefight. Like, don't break down crying when you're trying to pull the trigger.
Right.
But you can be whatever, you can be Rambo when you're pulling the trigger. But the second, like, you get back and you get safe, then you have to go through the whatever roller coaster of the emotions. You gotta let it happen.
Functional disconnect, right?
Yes.
I can't have you lose your shit right now. We're all gonna we're gonna just agree to shut this off for now. Then after we killed all those guys, then we're all gonna come back here and let all hell break loose. But for right now, disconnect from emotion, fight, win, consolidate at the far end. We'll get together when everything's cool. Bad guys are all dead. Everything's safe. I'm gonna cry and pee myself. You whatever you want. That's what I'm doing. That's my plan. Okay, cool. Get him. Right. I don't think I ever actually peed myself. Probably not.
That's probably more of a instantaneous type of response.
Just running the Rolodex there.
Yeah.
Don't think I actually peed.
You may not remember if you did either, too, because
no.
If your body is so if your body's like gotten to the point of stress where you're defecating or urinating yourself, your body's trying to like draw all the blood it possibly can into your basic functions, so your memory's probably gone.
Probably. No. I recall whenever I had peed myself because alcohol was a factor in my life for a long time. And then, of course, there's the Kandahar crud, which is a whole different thing that, everything leaves your body all at the same time and violently. That was a special experience. But I digressed.
I must have missed out on that going to Iraq instead of Afghanistan.
Oof, I'm glad for you, buddy. Because damn, like you would see dudes walking along and just convulse. And you go, yep, that man just lost every fluid inside of him simultaneously. How do you know? Happened to me last week. Yeah, poor bastard. Yeah, and then the sand there is like flour. It's not even sand. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what's like in Iraq.
Like moon dust. Yeah, it's the very same. It's like like powder.
Yeah.
So you can see like the exact footprints when you walk through.
Yeah, it's yeah. So, so I don't know, but what happened to me is I would take my shirt off, right? My outer shirt, my combat shirt, just fucking shirt, combat. But I'd take my shirt off, right? And the sweat would evaporate instantly, but the sand was like the dust was part of the shirt now. So for just a moment, it would like starch itself.
Oh, okay.
Right? It was like perfectly starched, so I could
stiff.
Yeah, so I could actually just set it for just long enough for my eyes to register that it was like intact and upright, and then it would just crumple. But for just long enough to register, it's it was pretty cool. So yeah, but so imagine that with everything exploding everywhere. That's a special experience.
So I guess just to summarize, I guess we walked out of there with you're a brand new NCO, so the boss program, if nothing else. And we're going to recommend you read kind of the classic literature. I would definitely recommend picking up a book or copy of Sheridan's book, this wonderful reading list. But at least the ancient Greeks, kind of some of the Eastern warrior tradition there, Lao Tzu.
Yeah.
Kind of just basic stuff that give you an understanding of the human condition.
I'll also toss in the Eddas and sagas of the Norse, and looking at it not just as a really cool story, because they are, but look at it in a deeper perspective. If you really analyze it, you can see the psychology in all of it. It's not just about gods fighting bad guys. There's if you think about Odin, right? that dude was battling PTSD and depression. That dude was messed up. He was given a vision of his own death at Ragnarok, the end of time, and then spent the rest of his existence as a god gathering an army to prevent that from happening, knowing full well he can't prevent it from happening.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's bananas. Cool. I'm in. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, there's a...
Well, yeah, so it goes back to that virtue orientation, right? The call to always be better, even though if you understand that you have to sacrifice going through it, orienting towards the good or towards the community.
And the sacrifices he made, right? The literal sacrifice. He hung himself from a tree with his own spear through himself. Like, he took out one of his eyes to gain knowledge, right? So the if you look at it from that perspective, right? There's a lot more going on there than just the cool stories. There are pretty cool stories, but it's the same with yeah. So I would throw in the sagas and the Eddas of the Norse, as well as like the Rise of the Ancient Greeks. I would throw in maybe not the Hagakure. That's a little weird, but a lot of the like Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings, 100%. He talks about psychology in there all the time, right? Functional disconnect. It's all about functional disconnect, really. Of course, Sun Tzu and Lao Tzu. Read a lot of Buddhist stuff. Read Buddhist stuff. Think about that. Like, think about Buddha's story in terms of the hero story, right? Very, very different sort of circumstances, right? Sitting under a tree without moving for years on end compared to going out and fighting a dragon. But what was he doing? Right? What was he wrestling with? What did he achieve? Right? So there's a lot of wisdom in that guy's stuff. You know? He's a pretty smart dude. I don't know if I can have that kind of patience to sit there. I can't sit there 5 minutes. I got ADHD. So, but yeah, so I would throw in some of that stuff. If you start there, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of a good enough start that if you start there, it will just kind of naturally wander around, right?
Yeah, and I can't recommend Louis L'Amour's novel. My father didn't teach me how to be a man. Louis L'Amour did. He talks. All of his books are about overcoming adversity, about fighting through, struggling on, persevering. With a 6-shooter and a horse, so it's really cool. But right, and it's all of his characters were not just tough guy fighters. They were scholars, self-educated. They were family men, motivated by higher principles. They were all men of morality. They were all men of ethics. Louis L'Amour taught me how to be a man.
I'm sure I'll bastardize the quote because it won't be exact, but Hondo, one of my favorite quotes in there is, "You learn how to be a good man by being a bad one."
Mm-hmm.
But it's the concept of, once again, it goes back to strive for virtue and excellence and understand that you'll be an idiot along the way.
Yeah.
And the trick is to learn to get better at kind of gearing your life towards the good.
Yeah,
and forgive yourself.
I had to learn the concept of good man, or relearn it, or maybe learn it to really understand it. Yeah, it's probably more accurate. I had to really understand the concept of the good man when I was struggling with suicide. Because I had convinced myself that if I needed to end my life to save my son from becoming me, because I am the worst father ever. No man on the face of this planet has ever been as awful and terrible a father as I am. I was not a good dad. I was crazy. So that doesn't really lend itself to being a good dad. And that's why my son has anxiety and is on getting therapy and meds and recovering amazingly fast, because children are very resilient, and he's an incredible little Oh, he's a wonder. He's a wonder. I find myself just staring at him and going, how can you exist? How can something so spectacular as you exist, right? But so I had convinced myself that I'm the worst father ever. So I was at this moment where I just like froze, where part of my brain kind of like a new synaptic channel open or something when I was recovering, and my rational voice, which I hadn't heard in a very long time, if ever, said, "Okay, are you really the worst father ever? Are you really? Have you ever, I don't know, raped your kid? No, no, I don't think so. No, yeah. So you're not the worst by definition, are you? Okay. So are you second worst? Let's see. Do you savagely whip your child with, I don't know, a bludgeon? No, you've never done. Okay, second worst. So we went through all.
Yeah.
Yeah, my rational voice is very sarcastic, by the way. I'm very sarcastic, as it turns out. He's kind of a dick, but no surprise. But so then we follow this path. Like, okay, hey, you know what? You know what makes you a good dad? The fact that you try to be a good dad. Are you succeeding 100%? No. In fact, you're probably succeeding about like 5%. But you're trying. So because you try to be a good dad, it means you care about being a good dad. So a shitty dad wouldn't care he's a shitty dad. You care very much you're being a shitty dad. You're trying to be a good dad. So you're actually not a bad dad at all. You're actually a really good dad. Oh, hey, by the way, yeah, you're also a good man. How do you like that? Yeah,
Huh.
eat that. No. Sit on it. No, shut up, Taylor. Sit on it. Sit. Just sit. No. Shut the fuck up. Sit. Because you've tried all of your life to be a good man. You haven't always made it, but you have always tried. So by definition, you're a good man. Now, how do you like that? I didn't, by the way. I didn't like that at all. But that was.
Yeah, I think some of that's like also understanding like the difference between being good and like excellence or perfection. A lot of people only perceive like excellence or perfection as like the standard, where it's like no, to be a good man, you can make errors, make mistakes, you can learn along the ways. You don't have to be perfect. And then every time that I hear them like orientating themselves to being like, hey, I need to be the perfect dad, it's like, hey, you're gonna fail. Like, dude, you're gonna drive yourself nuts. Like, try to be a good dad, and you'll probably end up most of the way to perfect.
Yeah.
But if you aim for perfect, you're gonna, drag yourself down.
Yeah, it's okay to aim for perfect in everything. Aim for excellence in everything, but don't expect to achieve it. Like, always work for it, because here's the thing: if you're the kind of person who aims for excellence, who aims for perfection, that means you, by definition, can never reach it, because no matter how good you get, you're always gonna find that one thing you screwed up. Right? It doesn't matter how amazing you are at everything. Everything was lined up perfectly, but the thing with the and that's the one that sticks, right? That's the part that sticks. Not the 99% you pulled off wonderfully. That 1% that you just didn't quite nail. So, yeah, aim for perfection, sure. Strive for perfection. That's the goal, right? Try to show your kids and your troops, how to strive for perfection, but accept that it really is about the journey here. All right, you're gonna stumble, you're gonna fall. So do you have the parts to pick yourself up and keep going?
Yeah, really that powerful lesson about stoicism, right?
Yep.
Like, all you have right now is the present, and like if you spend all your time thinking about the mistakes of your past, you're not really performing in the present. So forgive yourself, move on. Aim for the excellence.
Yeah. Like mental illness, depression is constantly living in the past. Depression is not being able to let go of yesterday. It's I'm stuck here, and so that's what trauma is, right? Trauma is being emotionally stuck at a moment in our past, right? And not even knowing that, not knowing why I'm having these out of control emotional responses to something that makes no sense right now, right? Well, it's because whatever happened in this particular moment reminds your amygdala of something that happened way back then. So you're stuck there. So mental illness is being stuck in the past. But anxiety, the flip side, right? Hyperarousal, hypoarousal, right? Like depression, Anxiety is the flip side. You can't be depressed forever. You have to have those spikes. And you can't be in anxiety all the time because you got to crash. So anxiety is fear. It's fear of tomorrow. Depression is regret over yesterday. How about what's happening right now? Right? We spend so much time, like, and if you look at all the teachings of all the cultures of the world, all the really wise teachings all say the same thing. Be nice, live in the now. Like, you really can't go wrong.
Okay.
Right? Be nice and try to make today as good as you can, and tomorrow will be better. Learn from yesterday, make today as good as you can, and tomorrow will be better yet. And just be nice. Like, they all say that. Why don't we listen?
Because we're human. It's part of humanity is knowing that you're not going to listen.
Yeah.
So I think we covered a huge amount of territory in this interview. So do you have resources for people that want to reach out and get in contact with you? Social media contacts?
Yes, I asked. This is ironic. People who know me are harassing me because I actually have a website now, and I hate technology. I am a hardcore Luddite. I really am. This is very painful for me, but I have a website, SheridanTaylor.ca. Not Taylor Sheridan. That's the guy who wrote Yellowstone. He makes way more money than me.
Yep.
He's making way more money than me. He writes different stuff. His stuff's more fun, actually. Mine's more important. His is way more entertaining. But I need to work with that guy. I just want to have Taylor Sheridan and Sheridan Taylor. But yeah, if you want to reach out to me, the quickest way is my website now, SheridanTaylor.ca.
Any last moment or last thoughts?
No. Yeah, you know what? I do. Yeah. What I said last. Learn from yesterday. Make today as good as you can. Tomorrow will be better, and be nice to each other. It makes the world better.
So great way then. So for the audience out there, I thank you for watching us. I invite you to subscribe to the Evolving Warfighter for more videos on military history and military philosophy. Until next time, focus on your self-development so we can dominate the modern battlefield. Thank you.